Okay, and I think we're recording. So, okay, everybody, we'll get started. So, again, my name is Aaron Essery, Assistant Extension Specialist for Viticulture and Enology at Oklahoma State. And this presentation is over just, basic winemaking 101. So, here we go. So, I'll start with harvest. If you're going to make wine, you have to know when to harvest. And these numbers I have here are, excellent by the book numbers for first and foremost bricks. In winemaking, we use bricks. Bricks is sugars, soluble solids. You would like your bricks to be somewhere between 23 or 28. Your pH is also very important at harvest. For red wine, you want between 3.4, 3.8. For white wine, 3.2 to 3.5. And then your titratable acidity. That's something that should be measured. Not a lot of people do measure it, but if you can measure it, it's another great, number to have. For reds, somewhere between 4 to 6, and in whites, 3.5 to 8. Now, this is in a perfect world, and growing grapes, it's actually very hard to get all of these numbers within those ranges at one time. It is difficult because when bricks go up, pH usually goes up, and titratable acidity goes down. So it's hard to get in these numbers per se, but if you can, you're in great shape. Now, with that being said, if you have a vineyard, you need to own a refractometer and a pH meter. Like, those are two tools you need to have at planting. The refractometer measures sugars, which is bricks, and then the pH meter is for pH. This little tool in the top right corner is called a Winematica, and it's great for measuring pH/TA, and it will even measure your free SO2 when you go to make wine. It doesn't measure sugar though, so you have to get a refractometer. But if you wanted to invest in a Winematica, that's a great tool to have. Okay, so we've harvested. We're going to crush, destem, and press. As I'm sure you know, again, just the basics though. When you have red grapes, you want to crush them and destem them, ferment the must, which is skins and juice and seeds all together. When you're making white wine though, you press first. So you remove the skins and seeds entirely, and you just have the juice, and you ferment the juice. And that's what makes white wine white, is because there's no skin contact, there's no color extraction. Okay, fermentation. So for red must, and must is skins with seeds and juice, so for red must, fermentation should last around a week, and be between 77 and 86 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're able to control temperature, that's about where you want it. For white wine, you want it colder. You want it about 20 degrees colder, or somewhere in the 60s at least. But again, I've worked at wineries that do no fermentation control temperature. They just ferment in room temperature as is, and that's fine too. It's not wrong or right, but if you can control your temperature, these are the numbers where you usually want to be. On to pressing. So again, if you have red wine, you press after fermentation. If you're making white or rosé, you press prior to fermentation. Tartaric acid. So this is, we'll get more and more advanced as it goes on, but still. So acid addition should be made at fermentation. That's the best time to make a tartaric acid addition. You can still make acid additions later. It's just, it's no wrong or right. It's just usually just better. And every winery I've worked at, we've always made additions later to, like, we make additions at fermentation, but then it's like months later, okay, we need some acid. So you make acid additions later. That's no problem, but it's usually better to do it up front. Racking. This is something that I don't know if people do, but need to do. Racking is essentially siphoning the top clean portion of wine off of the bottom lees. Lees is that sediment that falls to the bottom of vessels. It's normal to rack 2, 3, 4 times throughout the whole winemaking process. You want to rack after pressing. You want to rack after fermentation. If you cold stabilize, which I'll get to in a minute, rack after that. And then just after months of aging. Gravity will naturally pull sediment out of solution, just, at the bottom of tanks or barrels or carboys. You want to rack, always rack. Lees is not really good. I mean, for the most part, if your wine is sitting on lees for months at a time, that's bad news. You want to rack off of lees as much as you can. which brings me to lees. Lees, if you didn't know, but I'm sure all of you do know, is the dead yeast, tiny bits of pulp, insoluble solids, macromolecules that just lay at the bottom of the wine vessel. You know, just in the normal winemaking process, lees gets developed all the time. And it's similar to coffee dregs. You know, when you make coffee in the morning, you have leftover spent grounds. That's basically the lees of coffee. And lees is just, you know, stuff that settles out at the bottom. You always want to rack off of it though. You know, it's a natural thing, natural phenomenon. Get your wine off of lees. Okay, cold stabilizing. This is a little bit more advanced now. If you have the chance to control your temperature, and let's say you do have glycol cooled tanks, cold stabilizing your wine is a great way to drop everything out of solution. Potassium and tartaric acid will actually form together to form potassium bitartrate, which are those crystals you may have seen. If you have a bottle of wine and you put them in the fridge and you pull them out later, you're like, what is this crystal that's formed? That's potassium bitartrate. And that's natural. It's nothing wrong, totally natural. But if you can cold stabilize your wine, it will drop all of that out of solution. At the same time, it's also going to affect your pH. No wrong or right, it's just the way it is. Potassium increases pH, tartaric acid lowers pH, and so when you drop them both out of solution, it alters your pH a little. And then if you go to add, funny thing, if you add acid after you cold stabilize, you've just kind of destabilized everything you've done. Sometimes you have to though, like if you have to add acid, I've already cold stabilized it, whatever, put more acid into it, maybe do it again, it's okay. So just know cold stabilizing is the thing. And if you've bottled wine and put it in the fridge and you've seen those crystals form, that's what it is. You've cold stabilized after bottle, which is, don't do that. Cold stabilize before bottle. Okay, potassium metabisulfite. I hope all of you are using this. KMBS is shorthand for it. So potassium metabisulfite is a preservative to protect against oxidation and microbial spoilage. It needs to be used often. Well, it needs to be monitored often and only used when your free SO2 is low. And I'll get to free SO2 in a minute. You add KMBS, after pressing, after racking. You can even use it at harvest. I mean, I've done that before. You put it into the must to kind of preserve it. It does inhibit microbes though, so it takes a lot to kill your Saccharomyces yeast, but just a little bit will inhibit the wild yeast. So it's okay to use kind of fermentation if you need. But also know it slows or inhibits malolactic fermentation. So I'll get to MLF in a minute. Again, KMBS inhibits microbes. Well, microbes are used to make wine. So it's kind of like, you use it in the aging process really a lot. Okay, malolactic fermentation, MLF. This is the conversion of malic acid into lactic acid. And I'm sure some of you know this, if not all of you know this. Malic acid is crisp, like apples, and lactic acid is soft, like milk and butter. This is totally a stylistic choice by you, the winemaker, but it's bacteria does this. Lactic acid is one of the few good bacteria in winemaking. And lactic acid bacteria is used to convert this process. Again, potassium metabisulfite will inhibit lactic acid bacteria, and so it'll delay MLF. If you're going to take your wines through MLF, kind of go easy on the KMBS and keep your wine warm. If you do not want to take your wine through MLF, chill your wine, cellar temperature 60, well, maybe colder. 68 is cellar temperature, but keep it around 60. And then use KMBS to prevent these microbes from forming. Okay, adding oak and tannins. So now we're into like the aging process. The wine has been made, we've sulfited it, we've racked it, we have some still wine, it looks good. Now we need to age it, add some tannins. Oak aging is a very common thing. Every winemaker in the world does it. For red wine, you can oak whites, very rare exception there, but most part, all reds get oaked. You can use alternatives, which is chips, blocks, spirals, and cubes, or just traditional oak barrels, which is what you see in the top right corner. Tannins are, I consider tannins kind of advanced because there are just so many different options to use. And there are different types of tannins. You know, there's condensed tannins, elagitannins, gallictannins, and each one is used at a different stage in the process. So tannins are good to impart mouthfeel, you know, that puckering type dryness sensation. Those are tannins. And oak has tannins, but tannins come from a bunch of different things. I mean, all plants have tannins, essentially. So if you're using tannins in your winemaking, really know your stuff and know what you're using and why you're using it. Okay. Bulk aging and long-term storage. So your wine is made, let's say it's in oak or sitting on oak and carboys. Now you just want to preserve it. You want to preserve it, monitor it, make sure it's okay. Usually the longer you age red wine, the better it becomes. That's usually how it is. Oak aging is a common way to do this. And you want to constantly monitor your wine, you know, by chemical analysis or by smelling and tasting, and add Cambius as needed. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't open up a barrel every week. I wouldn't do that, you know, but maybe you can pour some from a tank or check your barrels maybe once a month. So bring me to sparging. Nitrogen gas is a good way to remove oxygen from carboys or tanks or even barrels. You want to top up your tanks, carboys, and barrels. You always want to end a vessel completely full. The bottom left-hand corner is a carboy with about an inch of headspace. That's perfect. Even less. If you can get down to like a centimeter of headspace, that's even better. You want to remove oxygen all the time. The picture on the right is, you know, that's a good amount of headspace. That's not good. But if you have no option but to keep your carboy, like let's say all I have is a 5-gallon carboy and all I have is 3 gallons of wine, that's okay. You need to sparge that headspace with nitrogen gas though. You want to remove all the oxygen from that headspace and make, you know, remove the oxygen. Argon gas works better, but it's more expensive, you know, so there's a trade-off there. You can use CO2 as well, but I would recommend nitrogen or argon. Okay, filtering. So let's say you're towards the end of the process. You can filter your wine to the top right corner, small scale filtering. Bottom right corner is a plate and frame filter. I've used both, but I've working commercially, you use plate and frame a lot of the time. Different filter pads will filter out different things. They come in various sizes. If you're going to sterile filter your wine and get rid of everything in it, a 0.45 micron filter will do that. Chemical analysis. I'm a big fan of chemical analysis. I think it's essential in winemaking. Free SO2. So KMDS increases free SO2 levels. Well, how do you check free SO2 levels? With chemical analysis. I think checking your free SO2 is one of the most fundamental things you can do as a winemaker. You always need to check your free SO2 levels. The top right corner is oxidation apparatus or aspiration oxidation apparatus for free SO2. The top left corner is a volatile acidity, that's a cash still for volatile acidity. You don't have to know how to use these glasswares. They're not that intimidating once you know how to use them. They look big and mean, but they're not. They're very simple. But again, back to the Vinmetrica. If you wanted to purchase a Vinmetrica, this is a little tool that actually measures your free SO2, and it's almost just as good as the glassware. You know, if there's a way you can measure free SO2, by any means, do it. Bottling. Okay, so now we're at bottling. You know, bottling should really be done months or even years after red wine is made. I was talking to a lady who, you know, was thinking like, oh, I just fermented my must and I just went straight to bottle. No, it's not how it's done. Commercially, red wine is bottled for 2 years, white wine around 1 year. And this is also the time to make your final KMBS additions, because once it goes in the bottle, you know, that's it. It's out into the public, you know, to be drank. I made like a little timeline for winemaking you can look at, coming back to it. Any questions? So that just brings me to the end. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now if I can figure out how. And we'll open it up for a Q&A. How do I stop sharing screen? I'm not the best with technology. It's funny. Well, any questions?
No, straightforward.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I said I thought it was pretty straightforward, your discussion so far.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, that was just a rough basic outline. I mean, that's I can really go in depth on any issue you want, but I figured just as a starter, that's a good starting point.
Aaron, this
Hey,
is,
Aaron.
All right, hello.
go ahead, Rick.
Oh, just a real quick question. How long is too long, in your opinion, on storage, like red wine?
Oh, not almost indefinitely. Now okay, that's not true. If the wine was made really well, a decade, you can store it for a decade. If it's starting to slip, let's say you're starting to smell, nail polish remover, or you're starting to smell rotten eggs, then it's on the decline. But 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years is okay as long as it's stored well. And if you're storing it in oak, maybe pull it off of oak after 2 years. Put it in a stainless steel tank so it's inert, because the oak will keep imparting tannins. It'll keep imparting vanilla. It'll keep imparting these flavors and changing the wine. So, but as long as it's preserved and the numbers are okay and there's no faults, you can store it for a very long time.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Mhm.
Aaron, this is Oscar. Just wondering if there's a way for you to share the presentation, some of the stuff. I was able to take some notes on things, but it was
Yeah.
kind of, whether you could maybe email out the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. I will do that. I have to find a platform to put it on. Like YouTube is a quick answer, but maybe I don't have like an OSU winemaking page, but I will definitely record it and save it and share it somehow with you.
Okay. Even if it's just a PowerPoint, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. I'll put the PowerPoint in a PDF and send it out too.
Great. Thank you.
Is there anything you're currently experiencing in your winery you have questions about?
Hi, Aaron. Is there a recommended method for measuring alcohol, finished alcohol content? So in a bulliometer, or is there any modern technology that you recommend other than the old-fashioned bulliometer?
That's about it. I mean, the bulliometer is what I recommend. I mean, there are digital versions of the bulliometer, but it's essentially the same thing. There is a tiny little thing called a vinometer. It's spelled VINOMETER, but it's not that accurate. I mean, it's in the ballpark, but it's not precisely accurate. I don't know of a better way than an old school bulliometer, truly.
Hi, this is Taylor Riggs. I was curious, has there ever been a time where you have used fining agents? Maybe if like you're having a hard time with the lees settling before racking or anything like that?
For sure. I debated on putting that in here or not. I didn't know if that was advanced or basic. I have bentonite and isinglass are two. Now, your fining agents are charged one way or another. And I mean, bentonite is negatively charged and isinglass is a protein that's positively charged, and they work opposite of one another. So if you're trying to drop more lees out of solution, bentonite can be done that way. I think isinglass really can too, but it's just knowing what you're trying to drop out. And I've used bentonite more than anything. I've always used a lot of bentonite. It's a clay material, negatively charged. You put it in a bucket with hot water, you kind of whisk it up and you just toss it into your tank, and it will just go down and pull proteins, lees out of solution. So that's one way. Bentonite's a good way to do it.
Wonderful, thank you.
Aaron, this is Oscar again. Any recommendations for people that are not doing necessarily their testing, and they may not be on the call, but I think everybody on the call is fairly advanced, except me. But maybe the kind of for beginners, Marcus can't see there, so okay.
Yeah,
Get like a lab or some sort of recommendation to
Totally. Send them here. I'll do them gladly.
yeah, to get some higher level testing and really raise the level of winemaking as a unit. Maybe we could.
Absolutely. I mean, no, here at OSU, we have an analytical chemistry lab that I have a key to, and I have access to equipment. I would be glad to. You can send a 50 milliliter sample in and just say, like, contact me so I can like walk you through it, via phone call. If you send in a 50 mil test tube full to the brim, you want to fill up your sample tubes all the way. Again, eliminate headspace. Mail that to me and I'll do any test you want on it.
Thank you.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, maybe I should have done an advanced winemaking, because I wasn't sure how, because I've spoke to some people and it's like they need fundamental help, but if this audience seems to be more advanced, which is great. Dare I try to help with marketing issues? Or are we trying to like, sell wine? I'm not a marketer. I'm not a salesperson, but just seeing the business, pushing product is a part of the business. I hope sales are going well. I hope you're finding channels of selling wines too, I hope your red wines are aged and tasty.
Oscar, Aaron showed a picture towards the end of the presentation of a device that I've used for several years here, and I love it. The Winmetrica SC300. It's not very expensive, and you can get some really quality measurements. Sugar, TA, so pH, SO2 measurements.
Yeah.
Really recommend that to any of the winemakers out there. It's just a great little testing device.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Now, did you say you measured sugar with it?
No, sorry, not sugar.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Misspoke. Yeah.
But everything else.
pH, everything else, all the
Yeah.
critical, the pH, TA, SO2.
It's great.
There's actually there is an adapter that you can get for it to measure residual sugar. I've got it, never used it, but
Yeah, that's okay. Residual sugar is not really one it's good to know, but it's not necessary. Yeah, I agree. The Winmetrica rules, they're good. May I ask how berry chemistry? Is your harvest, how are the grapes coming in? How's Brix, how's pH? It's always been high in Texas. Like, that's where I'm from. pH is common to be in the 4s, I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
so we just finished up our last harvest. I worked with 4 different growers this year. We had 7 harvests. And in each case, the vines were really stressed this year. So harvest came in about a week earlier than they historically had. We had smaller berry size, much more concentrated juices, colors, flavors, everything's more concentrated. Because it was a heat stress, not necessarily a normal year. So Brix actually didn't get as high as normal. So everything was coming in 21 to 23 Brix, and pH and TA, I really pick off of those more than Brix.
Yeah.
And so those were all coming in anywhere from 3.4 to 3.5 range. And TA kind of depend on the variety. The lowest TA I had was 6, and that was the last round of Chamberson.
Okay.
But yet pH was 3.46 on that one. So that one was fine, but super, super jammy. That one we hung on as long as possible. And it came out. It's going to be great. We're not done fermenting on that one yet, but anyway, that's how they performed for me. Just everything was at least a week earlier than historically normal.
Okay, good. I'm having to adjust to the, Oklahoma climate. I'm used to growing in Texas where it's hot. Well, it's been hot here too, but like, it's hard in zone 8 down there. So it takes longer to go into dormancy, and bud break is earlier too. And here I've heard bud break is like April, it can be April. And dormancy starts, about now to November. And so getting used to that, but not too much of a big shift.
One of the big stressors we had this year was drought. We had a relatively wet spring, and then the rain just stopped. So some vineyards, 2 or 3 months with no rain. So they were just irrigating at that point.
We can only talk about our vineyard, of course, but our soil was very sandy, and during the peak of the heat, we were watering 3 times a week, just short periods of watering, but watering more frequently was one of the tools that we used to try to counteract the intense heat this year. Seemed to do okay.
That's good. You survived.
Yeah.
That's great. The research vineyard here in Perkins is pretty sandy soil, and so I'm sure it might be kind of similar.
Yeah, our soil is very similar to Perkins.
Okay.
Sandburrs and everything.
Yes, that's a lot of that out there as well. I have to grow it.
If you need some more, I can happily get you some, 20, 30 pounds, 50,
Yeah,
whatever you want. The biggest issue we had this year was fruit dropping off prematurely off the plants. You always lose some fruit to the animals, I believe. Not that I ever saw them or caught them, but I think a lot of the fruit drop was possibly due to heat stress. We may have a nutrient problem, as I keep whining to anybody that remotely even asks me. That might be an issue. But other than that, it was a pretty good growing year. We had virtually no bugs this year.
Yeah.
Very few ticks. We virtually had no birds this year. I think the hot weather kept them in the forested areas. I'm happy to report we had no plant deaths mid-season. I usually have a plant die mid-season for whatever particular reason. Didn't have any of that. So it was a pretty good growing season all in all, I thought.
Excellent. Anybody else have anything? Maybe just random thoughts. Oh, that's went a little bit quicker than I anticipated, but that's if everybody's satisfied with what's going on, so far at least, I guess we can jump off and continue with other things. But again, I'm glad to be here, and I'm very excited to help in any way, shape, and form I can. I don't mind visiting sites at all. I'll come see you and walk through your vineyard, walk through your cellar with you anytime, And then if you just want, sheer chemical analysis done on any wine, call me, mail me a sample, and I'll, run analysis on it. So.
Aaron, do you have any recommendations for those that are just doing kits or maybe making meads or other types of wine?
I can't say anything about mead. I've never made mead, nor do I here.
Okay.
Kit wine's a great starter. Like it's fun to do. But I mean, I think if you're really trying to build a winery, you know, you should do grapes. You know, if you're not planting, at least purchase some. And then, you know, it goes back to Oklahoma too. You know, staying within Oklahoma makes Oklahoma grapes make Oklahoma wine. You know.
Right. Right. Okay.
Were you able to harvest any of the fruit from Perkins personally?
Other than just for eating, I didn't harvest any to make any from wine, but a few clusters, you know, just for fun. I got here about the time it was ready to go, and so quick answer, no, I didn't harvest, but have been looking at the vineyard though, and sending it into post care, you know, into the post harvest, you know, type of work now. And come the spring though, I'll give it a pruning, you know, and start growing for the following year.
Is it too late to fertilize right now?
If you're going to, I would do it right now, like today and this weekend, and then I wouldn't do it past next week. Again, that's just with nitrogen though, in my opinion. Low dose of nitrogen. If you're going to put some out, you know, potassium and some phosphorus would be good. Even manure, like I've heard of people just putting manure out. And that's fine, but I would do it very soon. I wouldn't wait till October to do it.
Well, speaking of next spring, we have discussed this before. We think it would be a good idea to have let's call it a refresher course in pruning.
Workshop.
Okay,
You might want to think about something like that in the spring.
good idea.
All of us have been doing this for a while, but it's always kind of a good idea to
Sure.
recoup what you're thinking.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
don't often get an opportunity to watch somebody else prune, and that's the real value
Okay. Yeah.
in a different vineyard, different scenario, different kind of grapes. You know, talk about it.
Sure.
You know, do the finger pointy thing, and
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to your cordons and your spurs and your buds.
yeah.
Really.
Personally, an annual pruning workshop I think would be a great thing.
Yeah, we like that idea.
I can do that in the spring. I can even go through and like rough prune everything in like February or March, and then come out. And so, you know, rough pruning is just when you prune like 10 inches, above, and then you go through and you fine prune. I think I could do all the rough pruning and then come through with a fine pruning workshop. That would be good.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Harley's typically done rough pruning in January, February.
Okay.
And
Well, you can do it slower. You can also take a little time to tie up different things that need to be tied up. Usually in the spring, when you start pruning, it's a time issue and you have to hurry up and get her done. But
Yeah.
the rough pruning, you can kind of take a little more time to
assess.
do different
Yeah.
things.
And you also don't rip off the new buds by doing your rough
True.
pruning, which I have ripped off too many
Oh no.
buds.
Another thing that a bunch of us have been talking about is the dreaded task of netting. And if there's any way to educate or come up with some kind of new method that makes that job
No. Less.
difficult.
Yeah.
And we might even want to study Mark and Diana's vineyard, because they've
Yeah.
come up with an idea that we're going to see how it works, longevity. But right now, it looks like it might be a real plus for all of us to learn from.
And we did see it, in Texas where they had
We got the ideas that
stored their vine below the cordon, and secured it. But
I've seen that that's actually hell netting. They
oh, is that what it is?
yeah,
Okay.
they keep hell netting below the cordon, and then about July, August, they just raise it, for birds.
Yeah.
Huh.
Is it different than bird netting then? Hail netting?
I think it is. I mean, I think it's a bit thicker, more sturdy. But it's essentially works the same. It's just tiny little, like bird netting is laced with holes, and hail netting is too. But I think,
Smaller?
hail netting is. Sorry.
I heard something about bee netting too. I joined a great grower group that's across the whole country, but they were talking about bee netting, and I guess it's even a smaller hole. But
Yeah, I've never dealt with that.
yeah, and didn't know it existed either. But anyway,
Yeah. Anything else from anybody?
well, I think it was a great success for your very first
Yeah.
Zoom meeting.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And I can just, if you have any questions about anything, you can email me. I'll just keep putting on, I'll try to do these every so often, maybe once a month or so. And I can do one over, tannins and oak. I can do one over, fining. I can do one over even vineyard. We can go into the vineyard and talk about anything you want, so.
Aaron, I do have one more question. I'm going to be doing something this year that I have not done before. I know other vineyards and wineries do it, this practice, and that is to compost all of the racuses and all the pumice, yeah, and just compost that down and then put that in the vineyard.
Yeah.
What experiences have you had with that in the past, and is there a best practice for that stuff, and timing wise?
Yeah, I've done it once in the past. And it was just like you imagine, you just kind of go through and sprinkle it under row. Getting it incorporated is a different story. We had like a homemade tool. Imagine like a handled. It was like a spear, but it was a hollow spear, and you just punch the ground with it. Go under each vine and just punch the ground, and it's like you're incorporating. It was homemade, but again, that's the only time I've ever done that. You just put it along the rows, and then you go down and you try to punch it in as best you can. I don't know how well or not well, I'm sure it helps because it's it's compost, but yeah, I would say just incorporate it somehow.
You put that on.
We got a bunch of
Maybe
that.
put it on the weaker vines or something. I don't know what does it contain that would help the vine.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of potassium. I know that because berries usually contain potassium, but then that always ends up in your wine too.
Okay.
I mean, between that and like chicken manure, I've done that before too. I mean,
Yeah, we've done the horse manure that was well composted.
yeah,
That's a job.
yeah. So I don't know too much about the chemical makeup of the element of what it is. It can't hurt, I say. I've always been a fan of that type of stuff: composting, reuse, natural, sustainability type stuff.
Also gives you something to do with a mountain of
Yeah.
pumice and stems and everything. So I've got a pretty good sized one this year. So.
Okay.
Yes, you do. It's nice to have you on board, Aaron. We're really glad you're here.
Yes,
Yeah.
we are.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I love it. I don't know. I got into it when I was 23 and just haven't stopped since. I don't know.
Exactly what we need here is you to impart that love of the industry to everyone, and I know that if we can have a conference maybe next year or our next meeting, hopefully you'll have time where you can come and meet a lot more people.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
We probably need to get together for some wine tasting for
Yes,
analysis purposes.
Sure. Cool.
educational testing and
Can you educate yourself too much on wine tasting?
Not at all.
I don't think so.
I don't think
I
so.
don't think you get too much education on that field.
Aaron, have you any experience in teaching wine appreciation?
Oh, not really. Quick answer, no. Now, I don't know as much sensorially, as maybe I should. I'm definitely a winemaker and a wine grower, but yeah, if you're talking like, smell and taste, and I mean, I know
Right.
faults, your palate, it just takes years to develop a really good palate, and I'm building it, and just I'm not the best. So I mean, I could put on a wine appreciation class, but there are people who would probably know more than me. Yeah, that's the fun artwork side of it. Once you have like 6 or 7 or 8 different wines made and you start blending them together, it's totally artistic at that point. Aside from chemical analysis, it's always, every time you blend, you want to analyze again, check a pH, check a pH. That's always important.
You had a story about that.
Yeah. I still haven't learned that one.
All right. Well, any final thoughts?
Just say thank
Yeah, thank you. And what's the next topic? Are you going to have another one next month?
I don't know. I'm sure I can. Yeah. I mean, I will. I'll put on something else. I'll just decide later. Or again, if you have an idea, shoot me an email. I'll make a PowerPoint about it. Work into it. So, yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Until next time, I'll send everyone this the PowerPoint too. And then once I find a good platform to post these recordings on, I'll do that. I'm thinking maybe I have to create an OSU, enology wine, YouTube page or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, everybody. Well, until next time.
All right. Thank you for your
Thanks,
time.
Aaron.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye.